Well, it's a new year and new look for the Toronto Raptors as the pieces of the franchise future are starting to settle into place. Let's talk about this with NBA TV Canada host and producer Akil Augustine. Akil, I mean, there's only two members of the championship team left, Spicy P and, of course, Boucher, so a really interesting look. But let's start with the hometown boy. R.J. Barrett gets traded to Toronto, makes an impact in the first two games. What about him? What about this? How big is this for the Raptors?
It's huge when you think about the age and the skill set. RJ, right around the same age as Scotty Barnes. You see in that shot there. So the Raptors, the youth movement is on. And RJ is a player who, you know, he's a third overall pick, a lot of expectation in New York. And I think things kind of got stale there. But you look at the skill set, you look at the abilities, and you say there's still room to grow for this guy who averaged almost 20 points per game. So if there's still room to grow for him, you think the future is pretty bright with the combination of the guy on screen right now, Manuel Quickley.
Yeah.
And then you got, you know, of course, Scotty Barnes. So I think it's a big shot in the arm for Raptors fans who are looking for a sense of direction for the team in the future.
And Akil, we've woken up this morning. We've now seen two games with the two newest members of the Raptors playing, and they've played well, particularly Manuel Quickley last night, 26 points, 5 assists, 3 boards. Really great, not only great performance, but great enthusiasm, great athleticism.
Yeah, and you think about the opponent last night, the Memphis Grizzlies, and their star player, Ja Morant, the point guard of the same position. So to get quality at that position in this NBA, knowing the types of talent that are out there, it's huge. And Quickly's a guy that, again, I speak about the youth a lot because it's important. The Raptors had a roster that was, you know, long and tooth at some points, and then you had Scotty Barnes and Grady Dick, and you didn't know exactly where everyone matched up with each other in terms of a timeline for getting this team into the playoffs and hopefully pushing for a championship. But now that you see all these young players making up the core, it makes the future that much brighter, and Quickly's going to be a huge asset. I look at him as someone who could potentially be on the level of Tyrese Maxey, the point guard in Philadelphia, who was his college teammate and was a similar skill set. So I'm excited to see what he can do with the keys to the car.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about Spicy P and Dick, but I also want to talk about whether your assessment is that the Raptors right now, is this a rebuild? Because, like you said, you've highlighted the youth movement here, because this looks like a team that is suddenly more competitive.
Well, traditionally, when you think of a rebuild, you think of you got to lose a little bit, you got to take a step back, and you play for draft picks. Masai obviously has been adamant that it's not going to be a rebuild. I think the word is retool. And the fact that they've already had, you know, Scotty Barnes in place made it that much easier. And then this deal to add two young pieces puts them ahead of the timeline of a team that's in a full rebuild, because I think depending on what kind of moves you can make in the future, what kind of free agent signings, if there's a trade available, they might already be further along than teams that would traditionally consider themselves in a rebuild.
Okay, you talked about future moves, potentially a trade. We did hear after that blockbuster trade with the Knicks that Masai may be taking calls on Spicy P, Pascal Siakam potentially moving. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the Raptors would really move him, because they'd need a whole heck of a lot in return?
That's the question, right? It's what's the return for Pascal Siakam if the Raptors do choose to move off of him, right? The negotiations have stalled out in terms of the extension right now, and with Pascal at the end of a contract, that really changes things. I think it's a lot easier to trade a player who's got a lot more time left on the contract, and you know, a lot of people talked about, will he commit to another team? And if he doesn't, like, you know, he has a certain amount of control in his situation. It's hard to say with Masai. Like, I wouldn't have thought he would have gotten the haul he did for OG. So I'm not one to doubt his capabilities when it comes to negotiations, but it's up in the air as to what happens next with Spicy P.
Okay, and so I wanted to mention Grady Dick. He's been sent down to the Raptors 905, which, of course, you know very well. What do you make of this move? Is it just like he's not really settling in at the NBA level? How do you interpret this?
I think with Grady, he's a player that has a very defined skill set, and I think they wanted to get him an opportunity to get as many shots up as possible. I think the Raptors have a real need for his skill set, and it's a huge jump. Sometimes we forget that this kid's a teenager when he came into the NBA, right? So there's a huge transition for him, only 1 year of collegiate basketball, and I think they were trying to make this transition as easy as possible. And sure, he struggled to start with the Raptors, but I think giving him the opportunity to play in the G League just gave him a chance to have the ball in his hands, playing on an NBA-sized court with NBA-size, strength, length, talent type players. And hopefully it pays dividends in the long term. But I think the Raptors are, they're invested in him for the future. So they're not going to put too much pressure on what happens right now. It's a forward-looking process with Grady Dick.
Okay, I appreciate this forward look at the Raptors in 2024. We're getting used to all these new names. Akil Augustine, always appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.